Hello, welcome to PGurus. This is the second channel. And please do like, subscribe, share, comment. Abuse if you want to, but comment. So this time round, we're answering all the leftover questions from episode 101 to 104. Let's start. Aditya B. Among the Nazi generals, Guderian, Manstein, Rommel, and Model, who do you think got the operational art right most of the time, even after they were under Hitler's acute grip? Well, look, all of them got it right and all of them got it wrong. And I'll tell you why. This kind of fast-moving warfare works lovely in, small European countries. They just all, without exception, applied a warfare model that was overstretched to size. It was the wrong model application to the wrong geography. So it was a strategic mistake on every one of them, without exception. Tactically, they were all brilliant. Tactically, they all got it right. It's hard to say who got it righter and who got it wronger. They all got it right. And this is, in fact, this whole model of blitzkrieg, it did not start with Hitler. It had already, they had already been thinking about this for about 20, 30 years prior. They never got to implement it in the First World War. But the thoughts about it had been going on for a long time. Just like I said, at that time, when the thinking was evolving, it was evolving to the threats around them, which were small European countries. Suddenly, you large scale it up to this huge European country that's like, God knows, a zillion times the size of Germany. It's not going to work. Next. Maximilian, since we're using sensors of different origins, can we develop a middleware that receives the target data, prioritizes, instructs the weapon systems of equal different origin to destroy target? Theoretically, yes. Practically, no. Because look, first of all, it's not just, it can be developed. If you put a lot of R&D into it, it can be developed. Now, it's really a question of, say you don't like the engine on your BMW, but you like the electronics on your BMW, and you like the engine on the Mercedes. Would you rather tinker with the current BMW engine and develop that to your liking, rather than get the Mercedes engine and develop 100 different things that have to go into it to make it compatible with the BMW engine? Think about it. It's really that simple. So it doesn't make sense to do this multiple procurement thing. This mix and match, it does not work. The second issue is, will you even get permission? Because these are all, the way intellectual property works in defense is very different. You can't just mix and match it with whatever you want. Apple, you can put in any kind of USB stick into it. Android, you can put in whatever you want into it. You can make it talk to, within limits, you can make it talk to whatever you want. So for example, WhatsApp on an Android phone will also be WhatsApp on an Apple computer, etc., so on and so forth. But will they give you permission to do the deep integration required for this? 99.99% before Ukraine, no. After Ukraine, 150% no. Next. Francis, does India have the potential to be a manufacturing hub of the world in fields like semiconductor, AI, quantum computing? No, absolutely not. And I'll tell you why. It's because of your human resources. All of these require a highly trained workforce. The level and cost of that training that you put into a factory floor worker in things like semiconductors is going to be something like a middle to top level manager at an Indian factory. So first, are you going to invest that much in a worker? Second, is anybody with the existent required job training be willing to work on the factory floor? I doubt that very much. There's a very significant mismatch out here, skills mismatch. I'm not sure it's going to work. Will you be able to find some workers here and there? Sure. But overall and bulk, I'm not too sure. Next. Malyavan Bhattacharya, since you're both from Bengal and TN, which are known for their humid and sultry climate, What do you do to mitigate the effects of high humidity in your house? I keep the air conditioner on and I have a dehumidifier. Remember, you need to have a dehumidifier in your house because that makes the AC work much better. And also, Malaiban, remember, I live in Delhi, not in Bengal or TN. So, well, right now it's very humid. Next. Turtle research. With the recent statement from Rajnath regarding POK, Pak and China deploying more defense equipment and troops, do you think India might make an attempt on POK before 24? Absolutely not. No. Next. Archit Sarahogi. Why are infidelity rates so high in France, Denmark, and Finland? Are we seeing the slow decay of nuclear families in Europe? I think infidelity rates are very high across Europe, except maybe the South, no? I think you're seeing the falling apart of the family system. Generally, remember, families were extremely important in times of warfare and political uncertainty, where you could only rely on blood. Sometimes you could even rely on blood, but well, it did provide a framework to rely on. The more and more secure you get, this has a lot to do with development and security, where your security, and I mean security in every terms, economic security, your health security, your food security, your physical security, your internal security, your external security. The more and more that gets, the less and less uncertainty, and you forget what it is to depend on a family. So even a nuclear family is still a family, which you might not get along with. And this is really the reason. Next. Mr. Lee. Why are some YouTubers such as Kushal Mehra drumming up support for UCC even before seeing a draft? The 22nd Law Commission has invited consultations as of yet. Have you seen the draft? No, I have not seen the draft. And the point is to drum up support for the UCC so that you go and you make representations, number one. And number two, we generally know what the contours of a UCC are going to be. Realistically, what it's going to give marriage equality. It's going to give equal rights and everything like that. It doesn't exactly take a genius to figure out what the UCC is going to say, boss. You look at the draft Uttarakhand bill, it's already out. You already know what the provisions of the Uttarakhand bill are. So it's a very easy extrapolation. Next. Yaduvanshiji. Is too much sexual liberalism bad for society as an hypersexualized West? Even karma in Hinduism is bounded by dharma. It will lead to cultural deracination, and if so, how to prevent it? Look, I honestly don't know if it's bad for society, but there are a heck of a lot of studies to show that, generally things like porn destroy people's self-image. It destroys the ability for intimacy and things like that. And that kind of sexual liberalism leads to this idealization of hedonism in a sense. Self-obsession, a great deal of self-obsession. I don't think we've been in a place where we've seen societal hypersexualization. Elite hypersexualization, yes, but societal hypersexualization, no. So I'm a bit hesitant to comment on it generally because I want to see how it plays out. Because remember, hypersexualization in elite has a disproportionate effect. But will hypersexualization of society in general mitigate or exacerbate that effect? I don't know. Let's see, Yaduvanshi. I have no idea. I'm still waiting to see all the studies done on it. Next. Abhishant Kesar. Hi, Abhijit. Do you think BJP should come but Modi should retire? No. I actually, from everything that I'm hearing, 2024 is going to be when reforms are accelerated massively. And if that is the case, look, I'm kind of 2024 plus reforms, I'm kind of extrapolating it's going to happen. But if those reforms do happen, I think we'll need Modi at the helm to manage the fallout, because there will be fallout. Remember, all reforms have fallout. Next, Sambhav Jain. It is interesting that despite a rich maritime history, there is no famous shipwreck in India. I find article on a lot of Western ships starting from the 1700. but not one non-Western ship. Correct. And that's probably because our marine archaeology is so bad, or because we have very few to no rock beaches. We have sandy beaches. Maybe they're all buried under sand and things like that. We don't know. Also, remember, sea is a very corrosive environment. It's one thing finding the Vasa in Stockholm harbor under frigid cold waters. Warm waters like this would rot very, very quickly. Next. Ishan Sharma, what is your take on the remaining 1 year left for Lok Sabha? Will we see protests, and considering UCC bill might arrive, how is government preparing for those protests? I think the government wants those protests to happen. And that is why they're going to try shoving the UCC bill through. But I think you're going to see a lot of things that irritate the living daylights out of the opposition in this last year. Next. Pratik Mangwani, you mentioned Western weapons are meant to be systems of systems. How can India balance between over-reliance on one supplier and getting synergistic benefits? Very good question. I keep asking myself that. How do you build in redundancy? And unfortunately, the answer is you can't. Okay, you can't. Even if you want that sort of a redundancy, you go in for the Swedish data link model, which is semi-compatible with the NATO model, but it's dependent on a lot of NATO equipment, right? And NATO acts as almost like a cartel where everything is synergized for themselves and not for anybody else. Okay, so it becomes very, very problematic doing this. Ultimately, think of it this way. You only have a choice between Apple iOS and Mac, right? Does it make your life worse? No. So it's just one of those things where you've got to bite the bullet and decide which side to call it on. There's no way out of this dilemma. We can't buy Chinese, obviously. Not that I'd want to buy Chinese shit even if it were available to me. But we don't even have the capacity to develop the large parts of this ourselves. So, you have to make a choice and go in for that one choice. It's really that simple. But even within the Western ecosystem, remember, you will always have multiple makers of things. You'll have Snecma, you'll have Rolls-Royce, you'll have Pratt & Whitney, you'll have GE, 2 American, 1 British, though most of the core technology is American, but Snecma is there. You have Eurojet, which depends on Rolls-Royce engines, which is IP, mostly European owned. So, there are ways of manipulating the system even in the West, unlike, say, Russia, which is only Russia. So, next. Avinash Naik, if Ramayana's date according to astronomical patterns in the epic is 5K to 7K, why is there no archaeological evidence like seal encryption from the Sarasvati civilization except for the Pashupati seal? Well, what archaeological evidence do you want, Avinash? Because, Ramayana's date does not have to correspond with archaeological evidence for the Ramayana, right? A king's wife is kidnapped, he goes, rescues her. What exact archaeological evidence are you looking for? There is clear evidence of cultural continuity, and that's about as much as you can get. There is no evidence for the Western Ramayana, which is the Iliad. Zero archaeological evidence. There is zero archaeological evidence for the exodus out from Egypt. In fact, we know it's complete lies. So why are you so hell-bent on, why do you need archaeological evidence for the Ramayana? Next. What are the right conditions to free Tibet, Jack Sparrow? The right conditions to free Tibet are an internal collapse of China. Nothing other than that. There has to be a full-blown internal collapse of China. And till that happens, with a non-smooth transition of government, it can't be chaos, it has to be a collapse. And that is the only right condition, because remember, they have nuclear weapons. So, even partial collapse does not help. An economic collapse by itself does not help. Next. Hari, what would it take for India to produce high-quality products and also to be innovative? Everyone in our family now follows is AIM. Oh, Thank you. You invest in human beings. Okay, right now we've spread quality resources in too much quantity. You need to focus down. You need to have, every district needs to have a center of excellence school where children who show promise are brought in there. Keep it as a boarding school model where where you invest particularly. Fine. Before, all the quality institutions used to be in the cities. But can you not afford? There is what? Say every parliamentary district, 545 MPs. Can you not build one school that is a totally outstanding school per Lok Sabha district and make it aspirational for everybody who comes out there with proper swimming, proper tennis, badminton, everything? Network these kids. These kids deserve it, especially the ones from the rural areas. Can you even do that? Can you build 545 excellent primary schools? Can you build 545 specific skill training centers of excellence out there, where the kids know that they're not going to become Bill Gates, but they know that they will get a very in-demand manufacturing floor job like semiconductors, which will pay you a lot of money by the Indian standard. The third thing that you need, so first is investment in human beings. Always invest in human beings. I only invest in human beings. The second thing you need is labor laws. Right now, your labor laws do not incentivize the high performers, and they do not disincentivize the slackguards and the strikewalas. Quality is a function of labor. If your labor laws are crap, then your quality is crap. It's that simple. Next. What is the reason a hereditary Shia sect is acceptable while a Brahmin isn't? Good question, Arun. I do not know. Maybe you should ask the people, all of this, who say that a hereditary Brahmin is not acceptable. Next. Pavan Kishore, what is your take on the leftist rant going on against Ranveer's show on YouTube? By the way, your podcast on Ranveer's show is very informational. Thank you, Pavan Kishore. We did a whole podcast on this on the Sham Sharma show, so you can check that out. About them going insane. Basically, it stems from jealousy, okay? Ranveer's got much greater viewership and engagement than all these clowns. They're jealous as hell. And of course, when Rahul Gandhi was appearing on podcasts, it wasn't bad. But God forbid ministers appear on podcasts. And remember, the government actually announced it was going to engage with podcasters and send ministers to every podcast available. So this is just sour grapes of third-rate losers. Forget about them. They're irrelevant. Next. How do you rate Arnold Schwarzenegger as governor of California, Abhijit Sudhakar? Fan-bloody-tastic, dude. He knows his stuff. He knows his stuff. He did a lot for California. He was environmentally aware even before most people became environmentally aware. And I can honestly tell you, having met and had lunch with him, he knows his business. He knows environmental issues. He has a very, very complex understanding of environmental issues. And he's a fun, great guy to talk to. And as governor of California, remember, there was a huge increase in businesses coming to California. The economic boom of California in many ways was assisted in no small part by Arnie. Of course, now it's all being destroyed piece by piece by piece. But who brought in this whole environmental consciousness? And, I remember said something which was very profound, that California's fuel supplies had to go green because they couldn't depend on the rest of the country for fuel, because there is an eastern fuel supply system and there is a west coast fuel supply system, in California, because of the Sierra Nevada, is cut off from that east coast system. So he brought in a lot of things to make it economically viable, and then it took on a life of its own. He's able to think 3, 4, 5 steps ahead. I find the man super duper impressive. Next. Ruturaj Patil, what's your view on Noam Chomsky? Is he a philosopher? No. I think his work on linguistics is very good. His work on everything else is just rhetoric. I find nothing beyond rhetoric in what he says. That's it, nothing more. He is a classic rhetorician. Next. Millennial Mind. Is Shaktikanta Das really competent, or is the PMO running the show from the background? Will AI reduce the cost for education and healthcare? Is Shaktikanta Das really competent? Well, I don't know, but the PMO is definitely running the show from the background. And will AI reduce cost for education and healthcare? Yes, it very possibly can. One of the things we're looking at AI for is, and this is not like ChatGPT, which erodes with the greater number of idiots joining in, a tightly controlled AI education system combined with the tablet scheme which the UPA started, and I don't know where it is now, combined with basic infrastructure in villages, has a very significant revolutionary potential for education, especially if it provides personalized. What we're looking at is, say, the best maths teacher for the third standard, giving in AI form, giving individualized attention. You will not need 500,000 best third standard maths teachers. You will need that one teacher constantly looking at things being programmed, or 5-6 best teachers looking at things being programmed into a interactive module for the kid to be learning from a tablet, which because of village electrification then works. Healthcare, again, the same thing. Can you leave it up to diagnosis then? Because look, humans are human. Humans, the nature of a human is we make mistakes, we fail at times. Will this reduce? It will separate a lot of the chaff from the flare. And that's the most important thing. Chaff from the hay, sorry, not flare. Chaff and flare is an Air Force term, not the correct term, sorry. But it will make life a lot easier for you. The real problem with AI is the number of languages we have and the difference between the spoken language and the formal written language read on news. Will we be able to overcome that? Will we be able to nuance it? And the lack of technical words in our regional languages, very, very problematic. Very, very problematic. So in English and Hindi, it will solve a lot. Hindi dialects, maybe not, unless you do some serious etymological and linguistic studies and things like that and come up with new words and create a new technical library in every language. There are challenges, but it certainly makes a lot of things a lot easier. Next. Timothy McGee, can you please tell the difference you observed in Germany and Austria cultures, societies? Also, which airline would you suggest for Delhi to London in a business first class? Take a plunge. Okay. What I found in Germany is there is a very significant difference in food. The south is much more meat heavy, and I'd say that starts off in Bavaria itself. From Bavaria to Austria, it's much, much meat heavier than the north. And the north is much more, you know, fish and salads and things like that. Of course, the salad and vegan craze is taking over in the south as well, number one. Number two, I find that culturally, they're so similar, even though the south is more Catholic. But you think Catholics have a more laissez-faire attitude to hard work, but they don't. Like Germans, all Germanics, including Austria, have a bit of a Stockemarsch. Go Google that. I don't know why. That said, I find Austrian design of buildings much nicer. I find Vienna especially is much more highbrow, culturally focused, though Munich is as well. Now, when I say Austria, I'm including Bavaria in Austria technically. It is much more highbrow culture attuned, as opposed to the north, which has a very sort of pedestrianish lowbrow culture, and especially Berlin. Berlin's just one exaggerated, dirty little slum. It's a disgusting city. I hate it. Absolute low-class trash and lots of crime and things like that. And nature. I think nature gets much, much more spectacular when you enter Austria, the Alps, but also Bavaria. So, yeah, I mean, those are the most important things I observed. which for me was quite strange, because I've always noticed that there is a very stark difference between Catholic and Protestant Europe. And yet somehow Germanic culture seems to kind of even it out almost. Very strange, but yeah, that's it. But generally, in my opinion, Austrians are also somewhat more laid back, Austrians and Bavarians, which could be a Catholic thing. And Delhi to London in a business first, boss, they're all crap. Okay, they're all crap. British Airways is crap. Virgin is crap. Air India is crap. The only good thing is that Air India gives you a priority pass for immigration, and they have the best landing times in London. So I always take Air India when I'm going to London, simply because of the landing time, because I know I'm going to get crap service on BA, even though the new BA seat is much improved and much better. Next. Kanda Batata, should France have done internet bans to curb riots? What should France have done to curb riots? Well, there's no effective answer to that, Kanda. We don't know if internet bans would have curbed riots. You know, the shutting off of the internet, it's a vastly overused tool out here. But remember, you can do it in some neighborhoods. But in Delhi, when the Delhi riots were happening, we did not shut down the internet. You can do it in villages where the economic disruption is less. But imagine turning it off in major cities in France. The economic consequences would be catastrophic. So it's an opportunity cost equation that you have to look at. And no, I don't think it should have been shut off out there. I personally feel it would have been economically catastrophic. Next. Aditya B. Why is Napoleon celebrated even though he was a failure in the end? Aren't there many other generals who deserve similar or greater adulation? Yes, there are. But Napoleon was a fantastic piece of PR and engineering. Remember, his downfall starts from the minute he declares himself emperor and divorces Josephine de Beauharnais. You know, the French army considers Josephine de Beauharnais their good luck charm. And his downfall starts right out there. He also gets woefully inadequate in terms of his own military planning, in fact. He doesn't plan. Same mistake, earlier question we did on German generals. Same mistake. He applied a sort of small European battle scale on the large Russian geography, which simply wasn't going to work. But he did achieve very spectacular victories in Europe when he was good. You don't judge them by when they failed. Ultimately, remember, Scipio Africanus defeated Hannibal. We still celebrate Hannibal, no? So you don't judge them just because they got defeated. You judge them generally by what all they did. Were they innovative generals? Yes. At one point, they were extremely innovative generals. Prithvi Raja was not an innovative general. That was the whole problem. You look at whatever we know of his military history, he was not an innovative general. So, you know, there's a reason you celebrate some and you don't celebrate others. Next. Yadhuvanshi ji. Was India really sexually liberal, as some claim, by pointing Kama Sutra and well-known premarital union was condemned? Look, when you say is a pre-industrial society sexually liberal, understand pre-industrial mores do not allow sexual liberalism. But urbanism does. So it is a very natural assumption, you know, that India's highly urbane society in the early classical and classical antiquity was sexually liberal, especially amongst the urban elites. Was it sexually liberal amongst the common man and outside the cities? Absolutely not. And that is where the bulk of the population would live. So remember, when you say India, there is a huge difference between urban, rural, elite, non-elite, etc., etc., etc. So there was a certain great deal of sexual liberalism in pre-industrial urban India, which we see consistently because even Mughal society and the Delhi Sultanate society in the elites was an extremely sexually libertine culture, not just liberal, libertine, which would have existed even prior to that. Next. Ishan Khosla, are you for UCC or against? Positives and negatives, will it be brought this year? I don't know when it's going to be brought. They're certainly testing the waters for it, and I'm 100% for it. Next. Rahul Rathod, why is BJP doing Pasmanda outreach, and anyway they will continue to remain anti-Hindu and either educated or not, it is impossible to change. Rahul, do you know this for a fact? Understand, the problem of the Pasmanda is the same as the problem of the Khalistani Sikh in Canada. They are in a hostage situation by their own elites. Okay, they've been denied education, they've been weaponized, they've been used as the tool for riots and things like that. They do all the dying, and the Sunni Ashraf elites get all the appeasement that comes from them dying. The BJP Pasmanda outreach is the most important thing that they've ever done. They need to keep doing it because they need to break the power of these Sunni feudal elites, and they will. It is possible to change their mindset. If Saudi Arabia and the Emirates can do it, why the hell can't we do it? Unless, of course, you're claiming that we're incompetent, which we might be. Next. Arvind TSY, government is entrusted with equitable distribution of convenience, wealth, and opportunities. One decides on tax slabs, another decides on electricity bill slabs. Why be critical of just one? Okay. Yes. Critical of what just one, Arvind? You'll have to rephrase this question. I didn't get it. Because I criticize everything at any rate. Next. Abhishek, if European wants cheap labor and young population, why didn't they open the gate for South American white Christian people who would assimilate into Europe instead of Middle Eastern Muslim? You're assuming that South American white Christians want to migrate to Europe. They do not. Please remember that. Most European countries, the immigration laws are rule of the blood. Jus sangue, it's called. Jussangue. Jus pronounced jus. The rule, justice, sangue, blood. Okay. Most European countries operate on jus sangue, where if you can prove Italian ancestry, German ancestry, Austrian ancestry, Swiss ancestry, Spanish ancestry, you can migrate back to them. They don't want to go. Remember, South America has huge open spaces. They can't adjust to a lifestyle of cramped European cities and things like that. They want a laid-back lifestyle. They're happy where they are. So how are you going to get them? They don't want to go. Next. Mr. Lee, when an idea of Republic 2.0 was being discussed, some Raita wingers demanded to see a blueprint for UCC, and same people are showing support without a blueprint. Have you seen a secret blueprint? No, but I think the draft Uttarakhand bill is a very good idea of what it is. Next. Saurabh Jain, what is the difference between AC-130, Apache, Prachand, and drone in terms of cost, operational impact? Others, should India invest in AC-130 platform? What are our tactics? No, we should not invest in AC-130. Look, AC-130 is very specifically for a certain kind of warfare which doesn't exist anymore, because this is sort of a long operation, urban warfare, low intensity warfare support aircraft. It would be shot down out of the air in no time at all. Apache is more battle support for troops, which is a role that is rapidly being carried out by drones now. Is it completely going to replace the helicopter? No. The AC-130 would be much higher cost and much higher vulnerability. The Apache is sort of medium-ish. Well, it's almost the same cost as the AC-130, but it's heavily armored. It can do and go to places where a lot of things can't. I think a lot of the roles of the Apache, though, will be subsumed by drones. And we're already seeing that, because why do you need a helicopter in an anti-tank role? Basically because it flies out so far and then it delivers a precision weapon on the tank. Right now, the restriction of a drone is the electronics, the guidance electronics are super expensive. So even if it can fly the range, it fundamentally involves a destruction of the targeting mechanism if it's a suicide drone. Otherwise, if it's a normal drone, uh, uh, which does battlefield support roles, that's a fantastic proposal. And I do think a drone will replace an Apache at some point. The Israelis have done a very, very detailed study about this. They genuinely believe that drones are going to replace helicopters in the combat support role. And yet they are the most optimally suited to do that because they are world leaders in drones. And yet they have not done it. Why have they not done it? They came up with the literature on it. Incidentally, the literature, the one thing we don't know, large parts of it were classified. So we don't know what is the case that was made for the Apache. But the summary basically stated that there was no case for the Apache or any, armored helicopter. And it was essentially going to get obsolete. But they haven't retired their Apaches. They haven't even retired the Super Cobras, if I am correct. I haven't tracked what they have for a very long time. So that is the main thing. Next. Kyun Kirki. How is it that many Indians from the Middle East are able to go and study in America without loans, but American students or parents are in huge debt of student loans? Because America is a credit society. They are funded by credit cards of money that they do not have. Indians are a saving society. We save up for our children's education. In America, the students do not largely get funded by their parents, and if they do, those parents are already in debt. Next. Loop Bloke, with new movie Sound of Freedom has proved adrenochrome is not a conspiracy but a tough truth. I don't know if it's proven it, but I mean, did you actually need that proof? Why Indian government is quiet about child trafficking? Very good question. I don't know why we are. We don't take human trafficking and child trafficking, child porn or child abuse seriously in this country. Unfortunately, that is the reality. There is zero societal sensitivity, knowledge. It is something we would much rather not talk about. Next. Archit Saraogi, have you read Ethics of Liberty by Murray Rothbard? No, I have not. Also, have you read Democracy, the God That Failed by Hans Hermann Hoppe? Yes, I have. Long back, and I don't remember much of it, except to say that it didn't actually impact me much. Next. Sambhav Jain, do you agree that India overinvested in higher education post-independence? Yes, 100%. Our only focus should have been primary education, not secondary. Secondary should have been left open to the private sector. Primary should have fundamentally, of course, open to the private sector as well, but we should have focused all our resources on the primary sector. The only reason we did not is because Nehru wanted to provide education, top quality education for his elite friends in Delhi, and that is why the IITs were all set up in industrial, in urbanized, rich areas. So yes, and that desperately needs correction. Next. Revanth Reddy, with the benefit of hindsight, what were the greatest concoctions by the leftists regarding the vaccination and lab origin theory? Can you direct me to a few interesting papers on it? I've tweeted a lot of these papers out, Revanth, so if you go through my COVID tweets, you'll see a lot of them. But vaccination, one of the things was that mRNA was good. I knew from the very first description of mRNA, I didn't know, but I suspected something wasn't right out here. And every doctor I'd go to would go and tell me, boss, I am not going to touch this Pfizer vaccine with a barge pole. Without exception. They couldn't say it in public because they were scared, but in private, they were all saying no. The lab origin theory was obviously, we all know it originated in a lab in Wuhan, and it was a weaponized gain of function variant. So there's just been a lot of crap about this that's come out, but basically the efficacy, and the biggest thing was air-based spreading. You know, it was based on a categorization from 40, 50 years back, which is not even accurate to this day, based on the micron size of the this thing. And it's amazing how it just got away because of bureaucratic bungling and a concerted mafia angle to it. Again, I've tweeted out this piece. It's a very long read piece. It's a fascinating piece. I'd suggest you go find it and read it. Next. Revanth Reddy, what's causing the rift between MBS and MBZ in the Middle East? I don't know. Nobody knows. Literally nobody knows. And would that change the political structure of the Middle East and influence oil? No, because MBS and MBZ, there is some kind of unease, but it isn't going to be a full-blown rift. It is simply not. Both of them know that they can't afford full-blown rifts, and so they're already, everybody around them is trying to manage it. And the very fact that in a society like that, where familial links mean that information gets known very quickly, that information has been so tightly contained, should tell you that it is being managed. Next. Agnostic, is porn good or bad? What makes India a nation? A nation is an imagined identity. It's that simple. You be a nation if you think you're a nation. That's it, full stop. Is porn good or bad? Mostly I'd say when you're a young man, I guess it's good, or a young girl. If you're overemphasizing on it, if you're too dependent, basically think of it this way. After you've finished college, or let's say after your 20s, if you require porn, there's something wrong with you. Next. Maximilian, what are the pros and cons of mounted artillery and towed artillery in India, Pakistan, and China context? Well, mounted artillery is fantastic for, tracked or wheeled is fantastic for easy to access areas. Some places require tracks. Hard to access areas require tracks, but tracks make it much heavier, much higher on maintenance, so much higher costs, because remember, it's metal with some rubber shielding to soften it up a bit, rubbing up against hard stone and things. And for speed, you require wheels. Okay, the wheels are fairly good off-roaders as well, but you need a mix of wheels and tracks and mounted to get them where they are. Towed is extremely useful in areas where mobility isn't required. So it removes the cost angle very significantly, number one. Number two, because it requires a lot less space to fit into certain parts, it's much more easily air transportable and things like that. You know, the trucks will go on the road and the cannons will be transported via air or helicopter or whatever. Reduce weight, reduce lots of other things. So those are the pros and cons. You know, if you've actually been to the Pangong area and things, you realize there are large parts of it which are actually quite suitable for tank operations and wheeled operations and things like that. So you do actually require, in large parts of the Tibet plateau, you do in fact see that there is a role for mounted and for mounted artillery, be it wheels or tracks up there. And of course, in terms of your cold start and rapid ingress into Pakistan of armored columns, very, very useful is mounted artillery, more than towed. Towed is for the difficult places. Next. Kanda Batata, why does the left hate consumerism? I think consumerism is a good thing as it grows the economy. I think so too. But it's not just the left. Integral humanism, which is the core philosophy of the Sangh, also hates consumerism. They believe consumerism is a very bad thing which should not be accepted. Some consumerism is okay, but who's to decide what is some and what is over consumerism? Next. Abhishek, you always talk about police reforms. Have you ever calculated how much it will cost and what amendment will be necessary to do in our constitution and department? And how much jobs will it create? Yes. So we did a back of the paper calculation when we were talking about this. We wanted to do a paper. And here's the thing. It costs something like $15 to $20 billion every year for about 5-6 years. And then it would stabilize at some rate. We did it about 7-8 years back, boss, when I was still at ORF. I've forgotten the exact figures. But there were several things we took into account. An expansion of the police force, an expansion of the training through career training, medical support for the family, retirement packages, etc., etc., etc. And anyway, the burden would be passed on to the states, right? And we also want to make an employment scheme for soldiers who cross that optimal period, 35 years, when they're no longer effective soldiers, where they need to go into policing and things. It was also a job generation scheme, and bridging training courses would be given through career for them, etc., etc., etc. So there were lots of ameliorating features as well, which brought that figure down. And for soldiers migrating into the police, it was center plus state share the burden kind of thing on whatever. Because remember, police is a state subject. The state has to pick up the tab. And there were things we looked at like body cameras with storage, and a simplification of rules. There were a lot of rules that needed to be simplified. Mostly what we wanted was our recommendation at that point of time. It never became a recommendation. It was a paper which we had to dump because the level of government opposition to it was insane. They did not want that paper coming out. And the main test of the regulation and laws was that we had to take, it had to be simple. It had to be no more than 2 pages long. We would take it to police stations everywhere, especially in vernacular languages, and ask the police a set of complicated questions to see if they had understood the language used in that draft. That is the test of a law. If your average policeman in a Mofussil area can understand it in his own language, that is where a law passes muster, or the language of the law passes muster. So it was that simple. We checked all of that. They did not want any of it coming out. They didn't want the cost calculation. They didn't want anything coming out. And, you know, we depend on the government for funding. So we had to shut up and move on. Next. Ishan Sharma. Today, PM Modi said that in his third term, India's economy will in top 3. Do you think it's possible that USA is destroying its own economy and Europe also de-dollarizing? Yeah, I think it will be possible in the top 3, but you know, lots of serious reforms are needed, boss. ऐसे तो top 3 में नहीं हो सकता. You need serious reforms. Next. Himank 957. What will be Turkey's position if Iran decides to intervene in Azerbaijan or give military support to Armenia? Iran already gives military support to Armenia. They just don't intervene directly. If Iran intervenes in Azerbaijan, Turkey will, they will not intervene, but they will provide, they will up their military support to Azerbaijan very, very significantly. Saurabh Jain, Jai Janendra. To both tried the G7 Vietnamese coffee and Coca Oriental noodles. Any other recommendations, veg only, and how's the house coming up? The house is progressing slowly. You know, I'm a very difficult client because I want things done perfectly. So I'm like literally going to the site every day and seeing to it all the exposed why metal क्यों दिख रहा है अभी आपने उसको cover क्यों नहीं किया आपको पता है बारिश है and you haven't covered the this thing. So I'm going and being a complete pain in the ass. I'm the client from hell. I don't think I'm the client from hell. I'm just a perfectionist and I need things done a certain way. So that's that. Thank you very much for asking. And I'm glad you like the G7 Vietnamese coffee. I hope you tried the 3-in-1. That's my favorite, even though it's got a bit too much sugar. I love it. And Coca Oriental. There is one other noodle which I am going to check and tell you from my Blinkit. Let me find it in my orders. It's some Nissin Geki spicy noodles or something like that. And it is, I personally think it is fantastic. Yeah, this one, Nissin Geki hot and spicy Korean ramen. It's fantastic. You should try it. I love it. It's amazing texture and really spicy and nice, good depth. And one other food item I want to recommend is this chips called To Be Honest. Literally, it's called To Be Honest. TBH, To Be Honest. They're ripe jackfruit chips. We all have raw jackfruit chips. They have ripe jackfruit chips and ripe banana chips with amchur. They're fantastic. Try them. Their other ones aren't very good, but this one is something that's fantastic. And the third thing is Skippy, not Skippy. What's the one? Fruit Chill. Fruit Chill, they have this, their grape one is the best. Their grape, strawberry, and mango are fantastic. Their lemon isn't very good. Their imli I haven't tried yet because it's always sold out. But yeah, it always comes in mixed packs. That's the unfortunate one. But their mango, strawberry, and especially their grape are outstanding. Next. Ishan Khosla, do you think love jihad is a thing? Your view on the Kerala story, is it a fake phenomenon as claimed? But it is a reality. But remember, go to my timeline and see me ever use the term love jihad. I have never used that term love jihad. There is a reason for it's a societal phenomenon. Muslim societies are extremely segregated. Extremely segregated. In Arab countries and in Iran, one of the ways of overcoming that is a lot of pre-marriage homosexuality. It's very casual, all-pervasive across society. In a place like India, where it is far less socially tolerable, and you'll be amazed at the level of social tolerance of non-marriage, non-live-in, casual homosexuality in those countries. It is not tolerated in India. You don't have the space in India because you live with your parents. I mean, you don't have space to explore your sexuality when you're young, when you're the horniest and where your sex drive is the most. What ends up happening is that you can't socialize with women from your own community, and so you socialize with what is available, which is why you will have extremely high intermarriage rates, and you will have a much greater cross-pollination. In some cases, where there are radicals, they will actively seek to marry women. And of course, this is a classic phenomenon you see. And in terms of population, 1.4 billion, if you have even like 0.5% who's radicalized, that's still a few million people who are radicalized, who want to carry out, who want to marry a kafir woman to bring her on the path of right or whatever. And you see it a lot in Pakistan about how Hindu women get abducted, right? So yeah, but I'm always very hesitant to call it love jihad. I don't think that was a very good term. I think we should have stuck to grooming gangs, which was a much more technically and anthropologically explainable term. The problem is nobody wants to get into the anthropology of it. Catchwords and then you go berserk over it. Next. Shekhar Mathur, I don't find the BJP in Karnataka taking the UDP recording issue actively or aggressively. Boss, it's more aggressive than they've been in a long time. So at least give them that. We have not found any action from Tejasvi Surya. Why? Tejasvi has been told to lay low. That is why. Next. Dhyaneshwar Salunke. Sir, few refugees have troubled France. What India is possibility like very high? 5 crore Bangla and Rohingya and Myanmar. I don't think that many Myanmar refugees, Bangladeshi, yes. And all 25 crores are not jihadi supporters. If they were, boss, you'd be in a state of civil war, Dhyaneshwar. So please don't make that mistake. In fact, it is precisely this attitude that keeps radicalizing more and more and more people. So calm down. The radicals are a very small minority in them. The rest live in a sheer state of terror. Absolute terror. And we don't realize this because a lot of us don't go, we just don't want to go find out what the reality down there is. But basically, it's a very, very scary situation. The government should have dealt with it. That is what the CA and RRC should have been about. It never was. So go ask the government why they did not. Next. Ganesh Soman, what updates do you have regarding the NEOM project in the middle of the desert of KSA? Do you think the project is really a successful steps towards humanity? Yes, I do. It is, if, assume it succeeds and assume it fails. The very fact that you will create the industrial ecosystem for it to succeed, it to produce manufacturing in economies of scale in Saudi Arabia will be a huge step up, even if it fails socially. Socially, it's a huge step up because Saudi Arabia is a young population which needs socializing. To date, there was no socializing because there was no mixed socializing allowed. There was no removal of hijab and things like that allowed in public, etc., etc. So they urbanized without a lot of the important things of urbanization, which was public spaces and socializing, which is now going to start happening because of NEOM. That is, NEOM is both a sociological project and an industrialization project. If one fails, the other will still succeed. Next. Arvind TSY. BJP isn't going on its own in TN for testing waters before state elections. EPS will lead alliance strategy. Why BJP is less confident than now? Well, I always told you, if you've been watching this program before, I've told you what the caste equation is. And I was never terribly confident about the BJP. I'm glad they're seeing it. But Annamalai does have a point. It says for the long term. He's not planning for the 2024 elections. He's planning for the 2034 elections, which is what a good leader does. And will Annamalai have to bury the ADMK files? He stopped talking about it. So yeah, for now, it'll have to be buried. It'll be brought out at a later date. Next. Shivang Bhardwaj. Why are there no Caesars and Napoleons in the modern world? Because technology has made Caesars and Napoleons less relevant. And does modern democracy and bureaucracy undermine genius? Yes, it largely seems to do just that. Because democracy is becoming too democratic to the point that it prevents the creation of a serious elite. Caesars, Napoleons, and geniuses emerge in elites, in elite societies. The more democratized you get, the less the elite. Probably because we produce a lot of geniuses. When you democratize something, instead of having one Einstein, you'd have 100 Einsteins, but you don't notice that Einstein because there's so many brilliant developments coming out, you can't pinpoint one. So, it's both a good thing and a bad thing. Next. RM, how do you see dollar fare? How do you see the dollar fare in comparison to the rupee 10 and 20 years from now? I don't do financial RM. You're asking the wrong person. I never speculate. Finance and sports are two things I never get into. Next. Dipen Das, why is monsoon session happening in old parliament and not in new one? It's starting in the old parliament and is moving to the new one. They're stress testing the new one. So it will end in the last few sessions of parliament will happen in the new building of parliament. Next. RM, is Modiuddin making BJP leftist, or has leftist BJP made Modiuddin? What is he today? I don't know. This is a chicken and an egg question. But I think you're being a bit too harsh on Modi, calling him Modiuddin. He's doing what is necessary socially to, first of all, break the hold of these nasty, trashy Sunni leaders on their community, to move Pasmandas away from the Ashrafs and to give them a proper education, to give them an out. Remember, all good policy. Israel prevented the third intifada or the fourth intifada, whatever it is, not just by sticks. It was by carrots and sticks. On one hand, you offer sticks, but sticks by themselves don't work. You have to have carrots. There has to be incentivization. And this is one policy in which I support him 100%. He understands it. He really understands it. But he needs to be harsher on internal security, which is not. So that has to be done. Next. Sobu, love Abhijit, how you responded to an idiot on JD show comparing his IQ with Udarvayu. Okay. People need to grow up, especially non-left wing. Alas, look, even I'm not grown up, right? I'm like a man-child. So, whatever. Next. Naman Kandapal. For lefts to frame Manipur as Hindu versus Christian is to restrict BJP's recent success with Christians in any. Yes, correct. Is AFSPA the only way for army to intervene and restore order? No, it isn't. You can order the army out anytime. Government not reaching out to CSOs. Well, look, I never know what the government is trying to do. This government, the way it works, is a mystery to me. So I'm sorry. I'm generally, if you noticed, I refuse to speak on Manipur because I don't know what's happening out there. It's that simple. But I would suggest the person to follow on this is Rami Desai. She's on Twitter. She did a podcast with Kushal. She's a fantastic person. You should talk to her about these things. She's the person to ask. Next. Levi Ackerman, what's the future status of wireless electricity? I don't know. I've not been following it. It is something that has scared me immensely, and I am not looking forward to it, which is why I don't want to follow it. It's one of those things which scares me, which I don't want to follow. So you tell me, Levi, if you're following it, you tell me how it is. Next. Q Cookie. Can I make regular North food in coconut oil during summers and in mustard oil during winters in Australia? Well, you can't use coconut oil in North Indian food, kyunki you can't. It just isn't going to taste it. Why can't you just use mustard oil throughout? I mean, North Indian food is meant to be a mustard oil based food, no? To use mustard oil, why do you need to use two different oils, in one in summer and one in winter? Don't. Just use mustard oil for North Indian food. That simple. Next. Abha Shukla, how true that Morarji sold a lot of Indian strategic assets to Zia? Complete bullshit. Because of his personal hatred for Cow and Gandhi. No, that's not true. Why did he not realize that Pak having nukes is far more disastrous? He did erode the intelligence network, but not sold strategic assets. But he did huge mistake. There is no excuse for it. And Indians are prone to this. Bhai, he obviously thought of them as his brothers and things like that. Gujarat also did it. Don't forget that. Indian intelligence is notorious for being unpredictable because intelligence policy changes with every government policy, and you will frequently have idiots who become prime minister who think Hindi Pakistani bhai. Next. Guru Prasad, what's your prediction on how long will the Russo-Ukrainian war go on? At least another 4 years. Well, at least another 2 years for sure, but total 4 years. Next. Minimum, no maximum limit. Next. Siddharth Rao, how to overcome a mentally taxing parents? Move out, Siddharth. Move out. Move out and go to a shrink. Say you need to go to family therapy and they need to stop badgering you because it's having a bad mental effect. Get the counselor or a psychiatrist to do that. The psychiatrist will be able to tell the problem. These mental health issues are not taken seriously in India. You need to take it very seriously. Mentally taxing parents can destroy you. They can destroy your life. Please take these things very seriously. Everybody talks about the nagging wife. Nobody talks about nagging parents. Take it very seriously. Move out of your house. Move out of your house. The first thing is, in this day and age, just move the hell out of your house. Even if it means downgrading. Move out of your house and restrict contact. It's that simple. Do it. Thank you. Jai Shri Ram. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe. And we answered all the questions from 101 to 104. Feel free to abuse as well if it adds an algorithm to the comment. Oh, sorry, adds a comment to the algorithm. That's one. Thank you. Bye. Thank you.